Welcome to Talking Events, the industry podcast brought to you by Event Industry News. Today's podcast is being recorded from the London headquarters of event app provider Guidebook. A big thank you to the Guidebook team for allowing us to set up the Talking Events studio in their offices. You can get in touch with the podcast using its dedicated Twitter feed at Talking Events. You can also watch a video recording of each podcast via the Event Industry News YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainability within events. What is it? Why should events be aware of it? What impact can it have? We're going to begin by referencing a bit of news that came out last month. Ipswich-based Midas Productions claimed to be the first temporary power company to adopt Green D Plus diesel, a renewable fuel set to outperform both fossil diesel and conventional biodiesel. Distributed exclusively in the UK by Green Biofuels, it has been shown to deliver significantly lower emissions of nitrogen oxides and particulates compared with rival fuels. With that in mind, joining the podcast today is Jonathan Anderson from Green Biofuels. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We've also got Jonathan Smith, Head of Operational Development at Farnborough International Airshow.
Thank you.
And Nick Howden from All Access Communications. Been involved in the event industry now for well over 12 years and a wealth of experience in interviewing and dealing with organisers. Nick, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Jonathan Anderson, let's begin with you. What is this new fuel? Tell us what it is and how it came about.
Green D Plus is a renewable diesel. We've actually just changed the name from Green B Plus, which I'll come back and explain why.
Mm-hmm.
Renewable diesel is made by a completely different way from biodiesel. It's the source material is still the same. It's vegetable oil, waste cooking oil, animal fat, etc. But instead of using alcohol, which is called esterification, to produce biodiesel, they use hydrogen, and that produces a pure diesel. In fact, it has exactly the same chemical formula of diesel without aromatics, and it's the aromatics which cause the issue that red diesel, or gasol as you'd like to call it, has. They also isomerized it. I changed the chemical structure at the distillery, and that means it comes out naturally at minus 32, cloud forming point, or the freezing point of minus 32, and it can be made down to about minus 46.
Mm-hmm.
That's far better than red diesel, which is naturally about minus 12 to minus 16, and far better than any biodiesel, the best being from rapeseed methyl ester, which is about minus 12, and the rest getting worse and worse till you get to palm oil, which is about plus 10, and animal fat of plus 15. Not much good on a cold day like we've been having recently in the English summer. The other issues you have with biodiesel is it has a lot of oxygen in it. That causes more NOx to be produced than normal diesel, about 10 or 12% more NOx. It also means it's not very stable in storage, so it has a shelf life of about 6 to 8 months if you're lucky. It tracks water, so again its storage life is not good, and by attracting water it's not great in the engine, because engines don't like water. And it also, because its production process is difficult, it often has a lot of contaminants in it, which cause issues with engines, and everyone knows all about that. And it also is not an issue much now, but the old engines, it will melt the old gaskets. And finally, it has a very high boiling point, about plus 160. That means when it drops into your oil sump, which runs at around 90 degrees C, it doesn't evaporate, so you need more oil changes.
So we've got all the technical information is there, the stats are there, and it's an improvement on what was available. Nick, your experience of dealing with and interviewing and speaking to event organisers, how big an impact will this change in fuel and this opportunity to deploy this new type of fuel have on events in terms of their sustainability?
Well, what's exciting about it, I think, is that anybody can use this, and so it's not down to particular companies having a particular mindset to use it. It's open and can be blended with and without any engine modification with traditional power companies, which means that actually I can't see any reason why everyone won't be using this ultimately.
So just to clarify, it's a straightforward switch. A generator company could deploy this fuel and there's no re-engineering of their hardware?
None. It's an ASTM D9752D fuel.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
And all engine manufacturers want that fuel. It is the standard fuel, diesel fuel of America.
So when we're looking at factors affecting event sustainability in terms of their carbon emissions, in terms of their green footprint, in terms of them seeking a more eco-friendly delivery of their events, fuel is obviously a huge factor, isn't it? We're going to come over to Jonathan Smith from Farnborough International Airshow. How big a factor is fuel in terms of an event sustainability at your particular event?
I think it's large, because although we've got quite a large permanent infrastructure, we rely on temporary generators. It's partly a greenfield site. Some of the areas, a lot of it is permanent infrastructure. So yes, we have an impact on all our particularly our generator providers, but also that impacts everybody else as well on how far that can go to what's all brought to the site. We take 3-4 months to build up the site. I think everybody coming to that site is going to be using, either delivering or producing something that's going to be using that product. So this has an almighty effect on the business going forward. My question is one, obviously, how available is this going to be and how quickly, and is stock going to be available, and what's the impact on costs?
Well, let's come back to Jonathan. Is a response to Jonathan's question about availability of the product, because perhaps events have been concerned about the availability or lack of other alternative fuels thus far. What's the availability like of your particular product?
We source the base fuel from Neste of Finland, who have a large factory at Rotterdam. At the moment, they have available for us 700 million litres, and in a couple of years' time, that will go up to 1.5 billion. So I think we can supply the event industry. We add an additive into it, which comes from Oxford University, which further enhances the capabilities. It is effective. It is as effective as diesel, so you've got no loss of power or having to use more litres. It produces about 35 to 45% less NOx, produces up to 90% less particulates, and you don't have to do anything to your engine. In fact, if you've got a bit of diesel still in your tank, you just add our fuel on top.
It's almost where's the catch?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is where's the catch. And well, let's ask that, Nick. Where is the catch? What has been the biggest factor thus far in events not exploring greener options overall and greener options for fuel?
I think there was the paranoia, and it wasn't actually paranoia. That one of the risks is with using traditional biofuels is that temperatures can affect it. It can affect engine performance. You have to make changes to the engine you're running. And what's great about Green D Plus is you don't have to do any of that. And in terms of cost, the way that it breaks down through various supplements means that it is on a par with red diesel cost, and that actually there isn't a hook. There isn't anything that it falls short on, because in terms of cost and performance, which are the two key things for anyone who's buying in power, what will stop them if they say, well, this is better performance or it's greener, but it costs you more. They tend to say, well, no, I'm not going to take that because everything's on quite a tight margin. So to have something that performs as well and is as cost effective is there's no reason not to use it.
Jonathan Anson, forgive me if this is a stupid question or an ignorant question, but arguably when it comes to green or carbon emissions relating to fuel at an event, one of the biggest contributors is actually people getting to and from the event rather than the actual fuel that's consumed by the site itself. Can the fuel be used on standard road vehicles? Could it be used in a diesel engine car, for example?
It's just been warranted by Volvo and Scania across the whole range of their trucks and buses. So yes, it can be used in a normal diesel engine car.
So legally, that's okay.
It's all warranted by the manufacturers. There's no issues. The only issue is supply. As I said, we got 700 million litres. That sounds a lot. The off-road market is about 3.5 billion, and the on-road market of diesel is 25 billion. So we can't supply the on-road market, and also the cost structure and everything. So we're just specialising, I'm afraid, in the off-road market and public transport market to supply, because we know we can supply it. We cannot supply the average station.
So Jonathan, when you say the public transport market, is that dealing direct with the public transport operators?
Yes. buses. We're already testing it on buses, and we're also testing it on rail.
Because ourselves, along with at Farnborough, our event, we spend a lot of money on our shuttle buses, going backwards and forwards, whether on site or off site. So obviously that could have a considerable impact on our running costs.
Well, there's another element of event sustainability, and when we talk about getting people to and from site, there's been a lot of encouragement, certainly in the music festival industry, hasn't there, for car sharing, public transport, Nick. You've seen a lot of festivals try and develop better ways of getting people to and from site. What are some could we perhaps see any examples of how events have done it successfully?
Well, green coach is one of the things that they use, and it's all about getting most people into one mode of transport, and public transport, and then shuttle buses and all that sort of thing. But if you can take the emissions out of even that bus journey, then there's all the organiser who can do. It can't point a gun at someone's head and say you've got to come by green transport to my event, but they can make everything in their capacity as green as possible. They've answered their question.
I think that's a start, because I think a lot of major events that have happened over the last, say, 12 months, and I'm talking about the likes of the British Open Golf and the Farnborough, the Ryder Cup and all those things, they're all doing this park and ride scheme, which is all, and we do that a lot as well. So again, you can only take it so far. You can only go back, you can't, as John has already said, he's can have a trouble meeting the demand of the private user. But even if we can go back to the actual bus companies, so we all utilise them, that's going to be a big step.
So theoretically, if we're working with events and looking at events deploying things like buses to get people to and from their events, as opposed to cars and private vehicles, we're in a situation where Green D Plus could be deployed within those buses.
Yeah, with no problems at all.
Excellent. Let's move things on a little bit from the fuel side of things, because Jonathan Smith, having you here today gives us a great opportunity to perhaps look at some of the different elements of sustainability that an event organiser can look to achieve or look to deploy. I understand, just before we went on air, Farnborough Airshow has gone from generating 2,500 tonnes of landfill waste to 300 tonnes of zero landfill waste in 6 years. Now, when we take into factor that this is a biannual event, this is taking place over 3 shows, is it a 2,200 tonne reduction in waste and nothing going to landfill? So tell us, in short, how has this been achieved, and why was the target set to go down to that level?
There's no target set. Obviously, you hope for the best and the minimum you can actually do. Mm-hmm. The reason we've got there, the only reason you can get there, obviously, is total engagement by everybody. You can't do it on your own. You'd never do it on your own. So you need all our official contractors, our exhibitors. That comes down to good communication. Actually providing the vehicles, pardon the pun, but the actual vehicles to do it, and that's whether it's with skips or actually in the last air show we actually produced our own transfer station, which is nice to see. And I've been visiting some other shows, and they're continuing that trend, and they're doing that on site. So rather than taking all the waste off site and then thinking about it, they're actually doing an initial picking on site, which gives you much more flexibility of segregating the waste. There's other areas as well. Is like, and it's like the diesel thing that's moved on. Is something like plasterboard. A couple of years ago would have been a hazardous waste, would have been a landfill product. Now that is 100% recyclable. Now we, alongside other events, are turning those products out. So again, it's now been realised by whether it's the waste transfer people or whether it's the recycling companies, where there's an idea like that, they've taken the next step, and now they're actually offering it to other events. And so most of our waste would be food, wood, metal, plastics. But as I said, everybody's looking at it, even whether it's the plastic that covers the chairs that get delivered, the plastic that covers the carpet. Carpet is now obviously 100% recyclable, as long as, again, you state what side of carpet. So again, that's where it comes, you get the buy-in from the various companies, because if you get your regulations right, they need to follow those regulations rather than just turning up with whatever plastic or carpet you want. So again, it's getting all the comms in the right order and getting the buy-in from all your contractors.
How difficult has that been to achieve, the buy-in from your contractors and your suppliers?
UK, not so bad. I don't know what that sort of sounds, but obviously overseas, we had 50% of our exhibitors and visitors are overseas visitors. Slightly more difficult, just purely because of communication. But over 1 or 2, and this is why it's taken probably the 3 shows, because I think the year 1 was definitely very much just an introduction. And once they start seeing, and they can start introducing to their clients at the end of the day. And so if you have one of our primes, one of our main clients at the Airshow, if they can demonstrate also back within their pitching the work they're getting to one of the leading, whether it's a Boeing or an Airbus or some type of company of their ilk, they can demonstrate they are showing sustainably ways, then they're more likely to win that pitch. So we're helping them to help us. So that's the way we approach it. We talk to the production companies and the fit out companies. They're always very interested to sit down with us and hear what are we doing for the next year, what are we doing for the next show, are we introducing something new that's going to help them, to help their clients to deliver a more sustainable show.
Nick, you're in a good position in that you're in contact and have been in contact with a lot of organisers, but equally so with suppliers to the event industry. How have you seen the development of the relationship between supplier and event organiser in terms of promoting a more sustainable approach to delivering events? Which side has been the driving force in promoting it, or has it been a collaborative effort from your perspective?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, I think organisers can set out that they want to, and there's certificates they can reach and accreditation they can go for, and that motivates to a degree. But again, it's normally cost driven, and suppliers, if they can answer that question environmentally, they will do. And I think it was Alex Trenchard at Stand and Calling who just to go back to the power element, was saying that you can do as many recycled cups as you like, which is all great stuff, and no one will knock it. But the essence of making an efficient event is the power and the emissions you generate through power on a site, because once the people are in there, that's your biggest pollutant. So if you can address that, which with something like Green D+, which is revolution in every possible sense of the word, then the battle becomes a lot easier to win. So I think that's the most exciting thing that I've heard in the last 5-10 years, is something can be as dramatically different as that, which will take a massive proportion of your on-site emissions out of the equation.
How will the message spread, not just, I suppose, to the suppliers of generators, which we've identified as being, I don't know if the culprit is the right word to use, but certainly the biggest instigator of emissions off an event site and off of any site that's using temporary power. Let's face it, it's not just events, is it? This is any site that's using temporary power is going to be guilty of this. How difficult will it be to actually get the message out to all of these suppliers, but then filter that into organisers and people who are looking to deploy generators?
You'd have to have your fingers jammed very hard into your ears and be making a strange noise in the back of your throat not to get that message, I think, because it's the most exciting thing out there, and it'll be everywhere. If everybody should be talking about it, and I think that getting the message out there is actually not a problem.
Based on an event, for example, we'll throw perhaps a difficult question, but based on an event producing 100,000 tonnes of emissions, what are we looking at potentially reducing here? Is there research to sort of suggest what percentage of reduction there might be in terms of carbon emissions when using this fuel?
Yes, it depends on the feed source. If the feed source is pure vegetable oil, then we achieve somewhere between 52 and 60% carbon reduction. If the feed source is waste cooking oil or tallow, animal tallow, we can achieve up to 90% carbon reduction. There is a small premium for that for Green D Plus, source from waste vegetable oil or tallow, but not much. But we can get up to 90%.
We've identified that cost is paralleled, isn't it? It's comparative to existing fuels that are out there at the moment. Coming back to the subject of fuels, I'm interested to know, Jonathan Smith, from an organiser of an air show, how difficult is it to control your own fuel, but control the sort of the general fuel consumption of what's happening with the people who are coming to exhibit at the show? Because this is the aviation industry. How big an impact are they having on your event?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something that's obviously posed all the time. How could you, Mr. Farnborough, be quoting all this sustainability stuff when what's flying around in the sky is burning X amount? We take the stance that is very much the business of the aviation industry. We're not the aviation. We're the front of the exhibition, giving them the shop window. Many of the leading companies are obviously spending a lot of time and money investing in new technology that's looking at, hence the new 787 Dreamliner, which demonstrates, I think, is where they're at regarding making flying as economic as possible. What we look at, as far as at Farnborough, the bit that we control is obviously the exhibition build and what happens, the people coming to the show, and what we actually are in control of on the ground. And we tend to leave, because there are some massive programs out there in the aviation industry, which we could probably be sat here talking for the next week. And so I don't think we're the experts in that field. But what we are experts in is delivering a sustainable event, taking that little part away.
Has it prompted consideration in terms of how you actually schedule the incoming aircraft, the outgoing aircraft, and the actual show schedule itself?
I think it has. I think going on from what I was saying earlier, I think there are a lot of the companies who are keen to demonstrate to us, and they want to. And as I said, we provide a very nice shop window, and that's what we provide. That's what we build for these primes to come and demonstrate the latest sustainable flying. So that's where we'll work with them on the scheduling to promote the most sustainable flying of whether it's a Boeing, an Airbus, or whoever like that. The one point I wanted to come back to, maybe with Jonathan, and sort of coming into is where do we think our friends the government might look at this? Because as far as potential taxes and things, because they tend to sort of look at something like this, and because presumably somebody's going to be losing out here, and I'll be concerned as an organiser this might last for a sort of honeymoon period until maybe somebody wakes up one day in government and says, "Oh, hang on, we're losing out here.
This is too good to be true.
Too good to be true. This is where it's going to go." So I just wonder, I'd be interested to know from an organiser point of view where that might.
Any thoughts, Jonathan Anderson?
Yeah, very good question. Can I just answer something on the aviation industry? I'm not an expert on it because it's not our market, but obviously I keep a close eye on it. And a lot of the new fuels are now is this renewable diesel being used in airlines. Last week alone, 2 American airlines announced they were switching completely to it. So it is coming in dramatically into the airline industry, and they're probably the biggest user of renewable diesel of any market.
So there is progression there.
Yes.
Excellent. And
so, yeah.
So coming on to the point about taxes, yeah.
At the moment, there's for producing electricity at a generator, you have 2 tax advantages. One is that you don't pay you reclaim the rebate duty, which is 11.14p duty, and you also get what's called a ROC. Now, as long as you register your generator or your site, it depends how you power up your site. If it's individual generators all producing power separately, then you have to register each generator. If it's just one site, when all the generators combine, then you just have to register the site, and you get a ROC. And a ROC is worth, you get 1.5 ROCs in fact, and a ROC is worth around 16p, so 24p a litre you get back through the power stations having to buy this thing the government's put in. Now, if you register your site before March 2017, you have that ROC for another 20 years. Right. Whatever the government says, that is set in stone. It's then changing after that to what's called contract for differences, but we'll worry about that in 2 years' time. So you've got 2 years to register your site for ROCs.
So this is something that really people should be taking up.
And then they've got
annual events really have got this year to get onto it and look at the possibilities of deploying it.
So that means that our fuel, depending on whether you want to get 52 to 60 or 90% carbon reduction, should be around the same price or slightly less than red diesel with those rebates.
Nick, collaboratively, how is the industry working to achieve a level of sustainability within its event as a whole? There are a number of different trade organisations and groups of event organisers that get together covering the entire spectrum of events. Collaboratively, how have you seen things develop in terms of how people are communicating with one another to develop as an industry?
I think the trade associations, there isn't one that's got enough teeth. From where I sat for a long time, I've always had a gripe that everyone's a little bit self-centred and a little bit about getting their membership fees coming in and sharpening their pencils. So I think there's a lot of room for someone who can actually overarch and sit over that and make that happen. But I think that something as fundamental as Green D Plus is actually the anchor for all of that, and because you can suddenly have that crashing through all of the doors to sustainability, because it's not cost prohibitive and it ticks all of the boxes. So actually, this is where the groundswell starts, I think, and you'll find if it all is, if the delivery, and that was my question really, is how easy is it to get more in? Because I think that's the crucial thing, looking to spread it outside events and to make sure it can provide for all events.
Well, Midas have announced that they're going to use this, am I right in saying, exclusively as their main fuel now, that they're going to use this as their fuel
Well, they've done
of choice?
They've worked with them, Jonathan, and been pioneering in testing it and helping just complete the circle. So they've been great, and they've always been dynamic in that regard. So it's to their absolute credit. But everyone needs to now follow very quickly behind them, I think.
When we say testing it, could we clarify and define what we mean by testing it? Has it been tested in a live event situation? Has it been tested behind closed doors? What do we mean by testing?
We tested it on a couple of Midas's 175 kVA generators that they use for events, and these results, as we said, already came out at sort of 35% NOx reduction and 90% particulates. We tested it actually on a Type 2 generator, which might be of interest to the hire companies, and we took that generator to Tier 5, which is not needed to 2020, or for particulates, and we took it to 3A on NOx. So we made it a much more efficient generator to meet all the new emission standards. Since then, we've tested it on a locomotive, and we've come out with the same results. Believe it or not, a locomotive is a diesel generator. And we're now testing it on buses. It's been run for a long time, for about 2 months on a generator, and they've stripped it apart as well and had no issues on the inside of the engine or anything. In fact, the engine was a lot cleaner than diesel because there's no aromatics, so it doesn't leave carbon behind or anything. It actually cleans the engine for you. So there's plenty of testing. Volvo and Scania tested it for 5 years on the bus companies of Finland, and that's why they've come out last month warranting it across the whole range of their modern buses in Europe.
So we can safely say that the testing has been done, and
Yes.
and the statistics and the information that we're giving out today has been proven over a long period of
Yes.
time and not just a few months. I'm interested to just come back to you, Jonathan Smith, regarding the Airshow. We've spoken about fuel emissions and fuel playing its part in sustainability. We've spoken about landfill. Another major facet of the event industry in the last few years has been development of technology, digital technology. And I'm curious to see whether or not there is a tie-in in terms of sustainability. Now, one thing I'd like to know about the event management system that's used for Farnborough, for guest admissions, for visitor admissions, for supplier, contractor details. Am I right in saying that most of that is now hosted online and through a central portal now? And has that had an impact on the sustainability and carbon reduction?
Yeah, as you're well aware, that's something we've been working on for a number of years, and we've now sort of centralised that totally. So right the way through, from, as you say, your registration right through to when you arrive on site, and you said we looked at the most sustainable method of doing that, of keeping it under one hub. All the contractors are registered on there, all their needs, and all their sort of the buy-in from as a client. So if you're ordering requirements, whether it's power or carpet or a buggy, that can all be done online. So we've sort of cut that down to the sort of central hub, and that's working very efficiently. And as I said, the user is now becoming reliant on that, and we're just expanding that even more into other areas as well.
And what about the ticketing aspect? Because what are the visitor numbers at Farnborough now?
Obviously we're looking at, obviously we have the trade, obviously we're really two shows. So with a trade show during the week, Monday to Friday, and then the Saturday, Sunday. Obviously we're, the actual, the final numbers aren't so relevant to that. Obviously they're growing all the time. Particularly the public show, the trade show tends to be relatively static as a traditional exhibition. Obviously we're appealing to new parts of the world. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we're looking at sort of whether it's your print at home ticket or your actual ticket list ticket, i.e. your Q codes, etc. like that, and with all the technology. And we pride ourselves at Farnborough, and we're pushing. We have our own in-house technology group, which we pull together all our, I'd say, technology partners who work with us, whether it's through the AV, whether it's the registration system, whether it's our IT and telephony, to basically look at what is best out there, what's best practice, who's pushing the boundaries. Can we collaborate with companies? Can we work together? So we're one family in that sense. Although they might be competitors as far as outside Farnborough boundary, when they come to Farnborough, we very much work as a family.
Nick, events can make significant changes to their operations to develop a more sustainable event overall and reduce their carbon footprint, their green emissions, etc., etc. But they can also be doing small things, can't they? And this is why I asked the question about ticketing, because if you have an event that has 50,000 people attending, and in the past they all had a paper ticket, you can significantly reduce the amount of paper that's being used by going with e-ticketing or making use of mobile phones. So it's not just about the major changes that events can make, is it? That there are small refinements that they can adapt within their operations that will all have a positive effect ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, it's about progress more than probably sustainability, if you're being slightly cynical about it, because I think that's people like innovation, and the more innovation can tie in with sustainability, then the better the world is. But it's about progress in a lot of events, and it's about being data capture, isn't it, essentially? So you can get the information fast and furiously from a phone.
I think also with that as well, James, it's all about a bit of culture as well, and it's what people get used to. Coming back to the sustainability thing, you know, if 5-6 years ago, even at home, nobody was doing it. It was all going in one big bin. People are doing it now. You know, you go home, you've got your little boxes, you've got your little just coloured bins. People now in the office are now expecting it. People come into the office, a new generation, they're coming in. Where is it? Where do I put this? Where do I dump that? And again, if you take that through to your visitor to your show, whether you walk around a permanent venue or we work around a greenfield site as a festival, where do I put this? You said I go to lots of events, and it's quite interesting. It's quite sad, really. But if you stand and watch people around a bin, suddenly gone are the days where they just go and dump stuff in there. They stand there, they consider what the best way. Okay, it might not be perfect, and they might not put it in the right bin, but they're considering what they're doing with that, and that's the feedback we're getting. Is people want to know where is their waste going.
That's a great example. Yeah.
The level of reduction in your generated waste and the generated waste that's gone to landfill, how much of a financial impact has had that on Farnborough? In being able to reduce to that level, because surely you were charged for the amount of waste that went to landfill previously.
Well, yes, because you get a landfill tax, and it's I think it's over 100. I can't fingertips, but I think it was over £100 a ton. Obviously, that has obviously again that's quite an interesting point, because a lot of people think recycling and that is free. You know, it's obviously there is a cost there, quite a considerable cost, because all that has to be, and say it's setting up a waste transfer station, getting the stuff. It's a major logistic exercise for our waste company, taking it to the ports, getting it. Again, unfortunately, the UK is catching up, but it doesn't have the infrastructure for some of the burners that use some of this this fuel, whether it's dirty wood or some of the other the products that are being created. So a lot of it, unfortunately, is going overseas still. I think we are catching up, and we will have in a number of years. So yes, there's a financial impact on ourselves just by purely saving that landfill tax.
What role can we've talked about taxes a little bit, but what role can the government play? There was a story on Event Industry News back in February. Event expert calls on UK government to lead on sustainability through new business tourism strategy. Should the government at a higher level be promoting sustainability, not just in the event industry, but on a wider level of business? Any thoughts on that, gentlemen? Wade in.
Yeah, coming back to buses, some reason the government 3 years ago decided to tax biodiesel on buses. It was tax-free. Buses, I don't know if one realises, but buses use normal DERV, and they don't pay 55p, they get 34p back. So they pay around 21p, and biodiesel up to 2012 was free of that tax, but the government's put it back on. Why? I have no idea. But now we've got this huge issue down Oxford Street. We're part of one of the initiatives to demonstrate, and we're working with Volvo on that, to demonstrate by using this Green D+, it will help the old buses get closer to the tier standards they want. But it's going to be a premium price, because there isn't the tax advantages on road that you get off-road for creating general. So if the government wants these things to really happen, they've got to seriously look at some of the taxations. A locomotive, the railway companies use 650 million litres of diesel a year, just running locomotives. I know we're electrifying, but the speed they're doing it at could take, I'll be dead, 20 years. So if they want the locomotives to be clean, and a lot of these locomotives are over 22 years old, they spew out emissions. They need to, locomotives, if they use biodiesel or our fuel, they do not get tax rebate, although they're electrical generator, and they do not qualify for ROCs. So therefore, why would a locomotive company pay a 30p premium just to be cleaner?
With the amount of money, Nick, that the event industry brings into the UK now, and we're talking billions, aren't we, when we look at the industry as a whole, there have been successful examples of the events industry not necessarily lobbying, but certainly coming together to develop new legislation, whether that be through better practice in staging and hosting and building events. Is there any role that the government can play, in your opinion, in promoting sustainable events and recognising that the industry contributes such a vast amount to the economy?
There's always there is. I mean, I don't know whether it coming out of a government mouth is particularly helpful, actually. They'll probably charge the poor for it. But I think it's almost better coming from, festivals, for example, are a great way to send a message, like Jonathan was saying before, in terms of recycling. And if you have Michael Eavis, for instance, on screen saying, this is the way you can do this, that and the other, or artists performing, your attention will be much greater than it will be if David Cameron's there saying it. It's because that's the sort of target market you're going for. So there's a lot that individual festivals and also uniform, and festivals together under a more positive trade umbrella would get the message out probably faster and more accurately than government would.
And I think Nick, you mentioned, and James, you said about the sort of trade association. Obviously, we are members of various trade associations. I totally agree with you. There isn't one, and some try and sort of double up, and I think some wasted energy goes in there. I think there is some scope there, and we're involved in some of the sort of a trade association that sort of is coming together regarding some of the sort of major, I would say, events from the organiser side, and I can see this definitely become a subject here. And I think one reason why that is being formed is to create some sort of lobbying lever with the Department of Culture and Media, and that's basically where we come under, and to try and get some buy-in and get them to recognise that we actually do. We at Farnborough, we have a significant economic impact on the area, and so does every other event. And so that's helped us in developing some of justifying some of our development, some of our funding going forward, and that's all got to link up to the government, and whether it's local government or central government. And certainly, so we're going to be taking it forward as far as participation in some of these sort of networking situations with these trade associations, and try and join the dots up a little bit somewhere, and to actually get some power and some teeth that Mr. Government, look, we are a significant export, I suppose.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, yeah, a contributor. In many other forms of industry, ISO standards play an important part in telling customers the level that you are working at, and giving confidence to customers of the level that you're working at. ISO 20121, Sustainable Event Certification, SEC, provides certification to the international standard which specifies the requirements for an event sustainability management system to improve the sustainability of events. So there is an ISO standard. How many events are actually aware of this, Nick?
There are. You get a lot of news coming through that people have achieved a standard, and it's but it's a splash, and it's a news thing that they work very hard to do it. It's absolutely to their credit that they do it, and I don't think they probably get enough recognition, whether that's through tax breaks or financial incentive from government or local government or whatever it is. And I think they should probably be given more financial respect for that, and that would be a great motivator to get everyone else to join in and do it.
Is the effort of going through something like that, though, perhaps putting off event organisers from the red tape that they may think they have to go through in order to gain certifications at that level?
No, I think at Farnborough we've just actually, it's quite good timing, because I've said we've just come through our ISO 2012-1 accreditation with success. The reason we put that in place, or the reason why we decided to go for that formal external accreditation, that's what it is. It's been externally audited. A lot of companies, a lot of organisers will find that they are doing things correctly, they are doing things well, they're running a good business, they're sustainable, but all that makes that do, and the one reason why we did it is it makes it put it down in writing. It gives you, somebody taught me a long time ago, is what you can't measure, you can't improve. So if it starts you benchmarking things, it starts you something. If nothing else, it makes you do that. There's nothing complicated about it, and there's a lot of, unfortunately, consultants out there that I think quite wrongly portraying that standard. I'm not here saying everybody has to have a standard. Yes, as part of us engaging with ISO, we internal, as part of the engagement, will trickle down to our contractors, and in fact a lot of the contractors had it before we did. So that was good news, and when we banged the table a few years ago, they took heed and they got on and did it. Or something similar. It doesn't have to be 2012-1. A lot of the other industries have something similar. But I said, I think it's that way of benchmarking, whether it's, we come back to the waste thing, it's and then seeing how you improve your energy consumption, seeing what you're using, what you're improving. And it's not necessarily have to improve. It means you're actually focusing. It means you can engage your staff, you engage your contractors. As I said, we've set up recently a simple thing as having a green team within the company. It's just focusing. You've got your real sort of eco warrior type people who really want to get into it, but also you've got your quite passive people that actually just want to feel good and actually. It talks about the technology side. It has some input in that, so it gives everybody an opportunity to sit around on a 1 or 2 times a year. See some quick wins. There's always the quick wins of whether it's the energy consumption or something, but it's also then going a little bit deeper, and that's where it involves sustainability generally as a company.
How long was the process to achieve the ISO standard, and how easy or difficult was it to actually attain that?
We did it over about an 18-month period. We actually split out because we're say an oddball. Everybody's a bit of an oddball, but because we have the Airshow every 2 years, which obviously again is difficult. You can only measure it when you're doing it, so you can't measure it every year. Obviously, we also have the on-site venue business, which is 5, and obviously we have the office. The general day-to-day business of the office. So we tended to split it down, and so we could get some wins initially, and then the last measurement was the Airshow said back in 2014, where we started the benchmark actually stuff. And then obviously we'll have another accreditation in a year's time. It's a 3-year process, and then come 2016 Airshow, we'll be able to see where we stand and measure and go forward from there. So it's as difficult and as easy as you want to make it. It's definitely something you need to engage people with. You can't do it on your own again. You need to have somebody sort of guiding you who does know your way through the forest. But as I said, it's as easy and hard as you want to make it, and as simple as hard as you want to make it.
How do we go about making things like ISO 2121 accessible to smaller events? Because I'm concerned that there are a lot of smaller events operating within the industry and operating very, very well that are seeking to achieve these levels of success and accreditation that may be put off by the fact that, well, it's okay, Farnborough International Airshow being able to achieve that standard, but how do I do that with a 2,500 festival?
I don't think that's where I think you don't necessarily say it has to be the ISO, and that's what I'm saying is some of our contractors are one-man companies, and I wouldn't expect them to come back to it. That's not sustainable for them to spend several £1,000s on engaging on an ISO program. But it's asking, the first question is what's your sustainable policy? Everybody can have a sustainability policy, and that's quite a simple document. That doesn't mean you're entering into an ISO policy, but get them thinking, get their mind thinking about but also give them a bit of help as well. So if they come back and say, sorry, I'm not being thick here, but what is a sustainable policy? Help them. Some of the bigger events, I think this is where they can feed something back into the industry.
Nick, you're nodding.
Well, I think it's almost easier for a smaller company than it is for something like Farnborough in a way, because if you've got, if you're a nascent 5-strong company, everybody starts from the ground up and does it, and so actually you're not. It's relatively easy to reach a level of accreditation anyway. So I think that's absolutely right. Start small. You don't have to get the same certificate, but you can be absolutely good and green about what it is you do, and and then anyone who joins the company, it's already happened, and that's a lot of it, is to make it part of the policy of the company that you join, rather than trying to write a policy from the ground up.
Interesting. If people listening today have got any examples, if we've got organisers out there who are listening to the podcast and have got examples, would like to get in touch with us about their own sustainability, their own sustainable policies, and how they're working with suppliers and indeed their audiences on promoting a more sustainable event, please get in touch. You can tweet the podcast at Talking Events. I'm sure there'll be more information to be found on the Event Industry News website. Before we wrap up, Jonathan Anderson, if people want to find out more about Green D+, how do they go about doing it?
From next week onwards, there'll be a website, greendplus.com.
Lovely.
But
so
plus spelt Plus rather than the plus sign.
I'm sure we'll be able to tweet links to that from the Talking Events Twitter, and likelihood is as well there'll be some information about that on the Event Industry News website. So we need to wrap up today's episode. It just leaves me to say thank you to Jonathan Anderson for joining us. Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Smith, Farnborough International Airshow, thanks for your input today.
Thank you.
Nick Howden, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.
This has been Talking Events. Tweet us at Talking Events and watch a video of today's podcast via the Event Industry News YouTube channel.